So you know those video game demos you see where they bring in these shitty voice actors pretending to be players on the voice comm?
Yep. That's big and blue and covered with lightning. Plug your ears. Oh, that's good.
And how about those other demos where you got this unrealistically jam-packed multiplayer match?
Star Wars Battlefront is not this cool, alright?
And this has become a really serious problem for video games. Every year you'll see these flashy, misleading representations of what a game will look like. Some companies will straight up lie and go out of their way to create this amazing looking demo running on probably a $10,000 computer. Look at this here. On the left is the E3 demonstration, and on the right is the final game. Ubisoft is the worst about this, but this is so common that it's just expected practice these days by these huge publishers. And I wonder how much of the game's budget is taken away so that they can work specifically on these demos. You see, back in my day, a game demo meant you actually got to play it. Shareware was a really popular way of distributing games where players could play the first chapter for free, but if they wanted to pay for the full adventure, they could do that. Doom was a popular game that was distributed this way. Nowadays, though, in the era of digital distribution, we have these unplayable demos, but I'm not sure we can even call them that. I'd say they're less game demonstrations and more game performances. But what does that mean, a video game performance? Can a performance within the confines of a video game actually be considered a performance? Well, to unpack that question, let's start by defining performance. Wikipedia defines a performance as any situation that involves 4 basic elements: time, space, presence in a medium, and a relationship between performer and audience. Video games might not exist in real space, but the players and the controls do. And as for the performer and the audience, I suppose that could be broken down in 2 ways, either with the computer as the performer and the player as the audience, or with the player being the performer playing a video game in front of an audience. I'll be using the latter framework for this video. People come by the tens of thousands to fill up stadiums and watch players play football. And while the games might not necessarily be scripted, the athletes are still performers, and there is a considerably large audience watching them. In performance philosophy, it's generally understood that in the context of a game, the rules act as a script, and the performers operate according to the constraints of that script. In the same way, the programming of a video game establishes the rules on its own, and accomplishing the objectives is still up to the players or the performers. People don't fill auditoriums for the Dota 2 International just to watch Dota 2. They do it to watch the players playing Dota 2. And it's not just esports I'm talking about. There's Twitch TV and YouTube gaming, in which streamers play video games in front of thousands of people watching over the internet. One time my dad asked me, how can you just sit there and watch another person play a game? And then he promptly went over and switched the TV to ESPN. Speedrunning. This is one of my favorite things. So speedrunners will take a single player video game and compete with each other to see who can finish it the fastest. And the technical skill and accuracy that's required to complete these games as quickly as possible is baffling to me. In order to do it, they'll usually execute a glitch or several to pass through walls or fall through floors or whatever. Some people get really salty about this. There is a common misconception that executing a glitch is cheating because it makes the game easier. And while glitches do often skip huge portions of the game, they don't make the game easier by a long shot. Most glitches require an absurd level of precision unparalleled by the game itself. Like this one here, Wrong Warp in Ocarina of Time. This requires the player to enter a door at the exact moment that the game tries to load another zone. And since the Nintendo 64 doesn't know what to do when it gets these 2 commands at once, it just adds the numbers of the 2 places together and loads somewhere completely different. The final boss fight in this case, but this glitch is used all over the game in 100% runs. And some people just like going out and discovering these sorts of glitches to manipulate the game in all kinds of unintended ways to see what happens. And this community of glitching people works with the community of speedrunners, and they collaborate and find ways to take advantage of the glitches and run the game faster.
This gameplay footage is not sped up, by the way. This guy is just a god among men.
Speedrunning isn't the only type of video game performance to take advantage of glitches, though. Some people like doing things like playing through Portal with the fewest number of portals, or this guy who plays Mario 64 whilst pressing the jump button as few times as possible. And this guy is just ridiculous. Mario is a game about jumping, but this guy is just like, nah. And the glitches this guy executes makes speedrunners look like fucking amateurs. He probably has a better understanding of how this game is programmed than the guys who programmed it. What even just happened there?
Glitches are hardly the only interesting things you can do in video game performances, though. This guy here, Stealth Gamer BR, his shit's interesting to watch on the skill alone. He plays stealth games like Far Cry and Assassin's Creed. This one here is Dishonored, and this gameplay is clearly rehearsed. Who knows how many times he had to replay these routes before getting it absolutely perfect. And of course, if the explosion of video game entertainers over the past 5 years on YouTube and Twitch is any indication of anything, it's that comedy is probably the most prominent form of video game entertainment.
Which one is the real Solid Snake? He may never know.
Video game performances are awesome, but what we're starting to see at events like E3 is video game performances masquerading as video game demonstrations.
Electronic Arts looked at what they had of Mass Effect Andromeda and realized that there was no way this game was going to be a success. So they must have diverted a good portion of the funds that would have been spent finishing that game and put them toward the marketing to secure as many pre-orders as possible, because they knew full well that once Mass Andromeda came out, the reviews would be garbage and that there would be no way of recovery.
And they just look a little bit off. I wrote in my preview, I think they kind of look like Sims 3 era Sims. They sort of just, something about the eyes is a little bit off. The eyelashes are incredibly thick and just obviously like stuck to their face.
Be aware, that's all.
Don't worry, I majored in glad handing during Pathfinder training.
It's probably the most severe example we've seen in the game industry, but our only hope to stop any of this is to just stop pre-ordering games.